What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with another 2023-2024 NBA team look ahead. We are on to the Portland Trailblazers, and so you know what that means. For I don't know how many years running, probably 5, but she's been on the podcast way more than 5 times. My good friend, Tara Bowen-Biggs. She is the co-host of the We Have a Take podcast. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts. I will include a link to their Twitter and their podcast feed as well in the YouTube and podcast descriptions here. You can follow Tara on Twitter at TCBBIGGS. I recommend doing that immediately, post haste. Tara, welcome back. How are you doing? What are we even going to talk about? There's nothing to talk about with this team. I'm very, very worried we're going to run out of things to say.
I know nothing going on with the Trailblazers. It's like, let's talk that for like 5 minutes and then we can talk about like whatever else you want to talk about. I'm making a trip out east in January, so maybe you can tell me all the cool places to go.
You're going to the city, so I know nothing about it. I can tell you which arenas you're going to be seeing the games at, since you're going to go see the Blazers play the Knicks and the Nets. That's the extent of my information on New York City.
Yeah, no, actually though, seriously, I'm so excited to talk to you about what's been going on with the Blazers. It's been a wild off season, nonstop. Start and stop with the drama, but just lots of interesting things are going on, and I'm excited to answer some of the questions that you sent my way.
And I do think that collectively the NBA intelligentsia owes you and I a thank you, as my dogs disagree. They're going off in the background, but we power through anyway, because we put this podcast on the books, and then the Damian Lillard stuff like happened a week or whatever later. And so I'm of the firm belief that had we not put a podcast on the books, and that the universe didn't want to make sure that the Blazers were at least somewhat settled, so none of our information was dated, the Damian Lillard trade saga would still be dragging on. And so on behalf of Tara and I, world, you're welcome.
Yeah, that was I don't know. It took a while before I heard I got my annual request from you, and I was a little bit freaking out that like this is the year that he's like, why on earth I gotta talk to somebody else from the Blazers. So I was very thrilled when you reached out again.
Please, don't be. And it's always going to happen. It's just, honestly, I was just like, could this Dame stuff just hurry up? And then eventually I was like, hey, if we put it on the books for October, like it might happen right before we record. And it
yes,
did.
so thank you.
So we have to start there. That is the only place to start. How do you feel ultimately about how it all played out and sort of the discourse that surrounded it and came with this entire situation?
So overall, I would say great. Considering our franchise player, Damian Lillard, who I have loved having on this team for so long, who has meant so much to this community, meant everything to the team, considering the fact that he is now gone, personally, I couldn't feel any better about how it all ended. I've said over and over and over a million times, Damian is a storyteller. And while he didn't manufacture this story that ended with him getting traded to the Milwaukee Bucks, when you look at it, like it was the best story that could have been written. So many things that, and I'm speaking for myself, but I have to say, I think I probably represent a pretty big chunk of the fan base, because so for me, it was like, Damian's here until he's gone. I was like the same way with LaMarcus. He's here until he's gone. Then LaMarcus, was gone. When Damian asked for a trade, I was like, okay, he's gone. I'm going to accept that. And I think everybody could see it coming. It was not a surprise on July 1st when he asked for a trade. And, immediately we all went into we started making our Damian Lillard playlists, reaching out to each other, going, how are you doing? Are you okay? How are you feeling? Giving each other extra hugs when we saw each other in person, sharing our favorite Damian Lillard moments. Like we got that out of our system, and like by July 4th, we were like, okay, so when's this trade happening? It was really like gave us a chance to like pre-grieve,
You're right. What is there like a fan base sentiment on how the request sort of played out? Because there's like these two, it feels like, I think a lot of people end up in this is a gray area. Both sides could have done something better, but like you had a front office that apparently wasn't as forthcoming with him or told him things that he thought he was promised, that they would make trades and then didn't. And then you have his trade request, which was one team. I know he added Brooklyn and Milwaukee sort of at the end, but it was one team. And so like that added fuel to like this just what became a very contentious fire. What is like sort of the fan base sentiment on that? Is it skewing more towards like you support the team rather than like the player and you wanted the team to get the best possible return? Or was it like did the way he requested a trade in the sense of yes, it was his right to request a trade, but giving them one team for so long, was there any sort of animosity towards that?
In my opinion, I didn't feel any animosity really towards Damian about that. Where I felt a little bit more problematic was whoever convinced him that there was only one team that he could go to. I feel like for some reason for him it was like one team or nothing, and that just seemed like that just didn't make any sense, but for some reason he believed that. And that seems to have like what made him ultimately sad in the end when he got traded somewhere else. It wasn't the trade that, that he wanted to. But to dial it back to what you're talking about, sort of the sentiment about, Dame, what the team did. If you go back to like draft night, that was when it was like written on the wall, right? It was like, right. Okay, this is what's going to happen. When they took Scoot, the Blazers are a large part of our fan base is so scarred from the Michael Jordan situation. We didn't need Michael Jordan. Man. We had Clyde Drexler. We didn't need Kevin Duckworth. We wanted Greg Oden. Like we've been so scarred by those two decisions that when they took Scoot, it was like, we've never been here before, where they took the best player that was available and they have that guy already playing that position sitting right there. And so that's when it was like, okay, the direction has been chosen. And that was what a lot of us wanted. We just wanted a direction. We just wanted to know, where is this team heading? Are we going to try to build around Dame, or are we going to try to build a new team? And at that point it became clear, and it was like a matter of relief to me. I was really glad. And that is not a comfortable place to be for the GM. And I'm not saying like this is the greatest GM on the planet or anything, but I thought that was really brave of him to choose a direction that did not involve Damian Lillard. And it was a tough decision, and it could have gone bad. And so far, I think he's been given pretty good grade for how it's worked out so far.
Do you think there was an element though of like, did Billy Cronin really make this? Joe Cronin, Billy Cronin, my God. Did he really make this decision? Because Scoot was there. Like the Hornets, thank you, Charlotte. Scoot's sitting there. And then it almost felt like and again, I'm like a million feet away from this situation. It almost felt like they were trying to force Damian Lillard to make the trade request because they wouldn't have traded Dame by their own accord. And so it's like, I think you already answered one of my questions where it was this the right time? Not just because they got Scoot, but because you didn't see a pathway forward to contend on Dame's window. And I think even when you saw some of the names that were out there for the number 3 pick, like people were talking about OG Anunoby at one point for the number 3 pick. It's like, OG's a good player. He doesn't elevate this Damian Lillard team to title contention. So it seems like the fan base believes it was the right time. But like, did this, like, I'm trying to just figure out how hard of a decision was this actually based off how the events unfolded, where it was Scoot's just sitting there, and it doesn't seem like, do you think this team would have made the decision by their own accord to move Damian Lillard following this Scoot pick? Or were they really trying to get it so that Dame was the one to initiate the end of this era?
I don't know, because when you talk about when it was the right time, we could go back years and identify several right times when it could have been the right time to move Damian Lillard. And when Cronin came in and he traded CJ, that was kind of like, okay, we're moving in a different direction. Okay. And then after seeing what they could build without CJ and it just never clicking and never being the right team, I mean, I feel like, Joe deserved a chance to see what he could do around Damian Lillard. Right. But, and I think he probably did try, but it's just, it's tough. Like, that's the thing, is it's hard. It's so hard to be a GM. And I think sometimes, like, I would forget. I'm like, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do this? And we have all these conversations around the water cooler or in the bar. Like, why didn't he just do this? Well, it's like, it's hard. It's a hard job. And when you look at how it all ended up, I feel like the Blazers are in a good place right now.
So what did you make of the Well, I guess first it's twofold. What did you make that he didn't go to Miami? Did that surprise you at all? And two, what was your initial impressions? And now that you've had some time to sit on it, of the return that they ended up getting when they rerouted Drew Holiday.
I loved everything about how it turned out. First of all, the one thing that I didn't like about it, like I was already said, is that Damian was sad that he didn't get to go to the one place that he wanted to go to. And somebody told him there was only one place. That was the only thing.
First of all, I'm sorry to interrupt. He got to go someplace where he has a better chance of winning a title. That's all I'm going to say.
No, but for those of us who really want Damian to succeed and win a title, we're like, oh my gosh, he has a great chance of actually winning a title right now. He's going somewhere where he's not the best player on the team. And by the way, he's going to be reunited with Terry Stotts, who so many of us loved and just wanted to see Dame and Stotts contend for a title. And now they're going to actually do that. And not only is Terry Stotts there as an assistant coach, Pat Connaughton, former teammate, Robin Lopez, former teammate. I mean, it's just like, it couldn't have ended up. I feel like he has a real chance to contend. And that's what we've wanted. We've just wanted him to have a real chance.
I'm sad that Wes Matthews didn't resign with them. That would have been like, let's just get the band. Does LaMarcus come out of retirement? Maybe let's just really get the band to come back together.
But not only was I happy with how that part of it turned out, because Dame has a real chance to contend. What they did next, trading Drew Holiday to Boston. I mean, that was not only did they, give the Milwaukee Bucks a leg up on Miami, who thought that they were going to win the championship this year. Then they went and made the Celtics better. So now these two top teams in the East are going to be fighting against each other for supremacy for the next 4 years. Guess who holds their draft rights after that? We now have unprotected picks. After
those are and they're way off. Like the Milwaukee picks, I didn't know this, and I don't know if you knew this, when I was writing something the other day, that first swap they have with Milwaukee is actually top 15 protected. So it's not like the 2028 thing to me is kind of like, but like having 2029 and then 2030, and then you have Boston. Everyone's like, yeah, Boston's probably the team most likely to be good. And I'm like, are you guys looking at their payroll right now? Like Jaylen Brown's not going to be there. Like they might still have Jason Tatum, but who else are they having? I thought it was very smart. And I feel like, I know other teams have done this, but like Joe Cronin making this decision to prioritize those distant picks, if we're being honest, there's a good chance that he's not the one who's making those picks, because job stability in the NBA is just non-existent at these levels. And so I thought that was a real guts. It was the smart move, but I think it was a gutsy move, because I even tend to romanticize these distant first round picks. But if you're looking at it from this goes to your point about it being hard to be a executive. If you're looking at it from I'm trying to do my job and maximize my time here, make sure that I'm still employed by then, prioritizing those picks isn't necessarily the smart way to go. I think you could argue, is it job stability because he's now telegraphed, hey, this is going to be a long whatever, but I do give him kudos for that's all Milwaukee had to offer. Okay, fine. But there was other stuff in Boston. And so to prioritize these distant picks, I think was actually a really good sign for the organization.
Yeah, especially after the two teams are going to be battling it out. And
I didn't even think about it. That I just laughed because Miami, or Portland, in one fell swoop took off Miami's two top targets in Dame and Giannis, because now Giannis isn't going to ask for out. And then I laughed because by Milwaukee thinking they were doing a favor by not giving Drew Holiday a heads up, which I didn't understand that at all. I think communication would have been the real form of respect, whatever. They end up improving their biggest rival in the conference because they didn't they could have built a 3-team trade where maybe Drew Holiday ends up elsewhere because they didn't want him in Boston. So I didn't even think of it from the Blazers end, where it was just that's a great point.
It was just a thing. It was just chef's kiss. Every tweet that came out following it, it was just oh, that's perfect. And it was the thing about Miami is there's two things I want to say about the Miami aspect of it. Number one, I felt like poor Tyler Hero, like my co-host Rose says, he caught a lot of strays in this, because it's not his fault that he's who he was and that he wasn't who the Blazers needed. The Blazers simply did not need guard. Yeah, they did not need him. And that leads to my second point, which is if I was Damian Lillard and I wanted to go to Miami and I assumed that Miami wanted me, I would have been looking at Miami going are you guys trying? Are you even trying to get me to come to this team? And it's when you look at it in the end, it's well, Miami wanted Damian Lillard. They just wanted it to be easy. They just didn't want it to be hard. So it's like, sorry.
Yeah, I'm with you on that front. And I really do feel for Tyler. I mean, Mad Men meme, that's what the money's for. Like, that's to endure this. I understand that, but he's good. They just didn't need him. I do think it's an interesting element of, well, they clearly, and this isn't spicy. Like, well, look what they got for Drew Holiday. They wouldn't have got that for Tyler Hero. Like, well, no shit. Drew Holiday's a better player. That doesn't mean Tyler Hero's bad. So I'm just elated that whole back and forth between like people, I think, underplayed. Like Miami, if they did their best offer, I think was a real offer. It just wasn't going to be as good or fit what the Blazers wanted as what they ended up getting. So like both things could be true. But from what we understand, Miami never even came close to putting their best offer on the table. So, and why wouldn't Portland be frustrated by that? Because as you said, you wanted Damian Lillard, a top 10, top 15 player for as easy and as little as possible. And it just, unless you have a no trade clause, it just doesn't work that way.
It sure went on for a really long time, but in my opinion, it was worth it.
Yeah, for sure. And it was a long, I mean, basically the stuff started even before the draft, but like this was all just in the ether. So from like draft night on, we're just caught in this like limbo. And some of it was like a very like fiery, like just contentious limbo. So like that's not even fun. I'm here for the jokes and the chaos, not the anger.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that was a pretty common theme amongst the fan base is that we just wanted to make sure that this separation from Damian Lillard did not make it so that he could never come back. Like, we did not want this to be a contentious, ugly separation, because so many of us, again, I'm speaking for myself and people of similar mind, not everybody, we love this man and what he has done for our city, for our community, put the Blazers on the map again, made us relevant. And what we didn't want is for the separation to be bitter and something that he'll never want to come back to. So I think feelings were initially hurt, but you got to think that once he realized that he gets to play with Giannis now and he has a real chance to contend, that the team was actually trying to get him to a good space, and that we'll be able to, smooth over whatever happens, and he will always be welcome here.
This might be a weird place to segue because we have so many new players and direction things to talk about. And you kind of actually touched upon this on your latest pod with Jalen Cooper. Do we have like a feel for what type of head coach Chauncey Billups is? And is it, if we don't, and it sounds like you don't necessarily have a great feel, which made me feel better because I'm like clearly missing something here. Is it his fault that we don't have sort of like, what is just your impressions of the Chauncey Billups head coaching experience so far?
Yeah, I really think we just don't have any data. Like, he's had basically 4 different teams, and everyone completely different. Every team was trying to do something different. Some were trying to win, some were trying to lose, some were trying to win with different players, and some were trying to lose with different players. Like, we have no idea. I have no idea. And yeah, that's a big topic around here, is that like, this is kind of the make or break year. If he can't show who he is with this particular team, who we've been told is actually the kind of players that he's been interested in playing, who are capable of playing the type of game that he wants to coach them into. Okay, let's see it. Okay, can you get these guys organized? I mean, it's no shock to say this is not going to be a good team this year. They are, there's lots of promise, but we're years away from a good team. Our point guard is 19 years old. He's never played against players who are better than him. I have concerns about the fact that like the 3 players that are our future are all guys who like never have played highly competitive games before. We can talk about that later. But as far as the coaching goes, this is a great opportunity for Chauncey Billups to show that he can get these guys to rally around him. He can get them organized. He can get them even just playing some of the basic. Like, he has to, like, we have 4 rookies and 2 guys this is their second year. So half their roster.
Yeah.
Is, half the guys who are, and, a lot of these guys are going to play too, have no or extremely limited NBA experience. So he's been talking about in practice, like, he has to go back to the very, very, very basic. Like, do you understand what I just said to you? Let's run it. Oh, no, you don't get it. Okay, I'm going to have to tell you again. So we're going to see if he likes doing that. And we're going to see if the way he does that gets results. All along, he has had the loud and vocal support of the players, every different iteration. Okay. Well, maybe not the first iteration that he had, but Josh Hart, Jerami Grant, those guys have all said positive things, and they've all talked about, and Damian, they all liked him, and he seemed to have the trust of the players. Now, this is like a golden opportunity for him to show what he can do. And if he can't, he's got Scotty Brooks right next to him. Well, and it's kind of interesting because Scotty Brooks, like I was talking about this with a friend this morning, like he must either really like coaching with Coach Billups, or he sees maybe possibly an opportunity for himself in the future. I think it's because he really likes coaching with Billups, but I mean, it's golden opportunity right now to show us what he's got.
That or having to survive the Washington Wizards made him like, you know what, I don't ever want to have to be like a head coach again. I'm content being the guy behind the guy.
Yeah.
Has there been, and I'm sure there has, I'm just not as plugged into like the comments and the tenor of what's coming out of training camp and preseason. Are there any clues to how like this team is going to play at either or both ends of the floor this season? I think you look at them and say like, yeah, they need to be fast, but like, does it sound like they're committed to doing that? Has Chauncey said anything about identities that he's hoping to install with the group that they currently have?
Yes, fast, which is no big surprise considering how young and athletic all these players are. But there's also been a little bit more of a focus, both from people who talk about the team and from the coach himself, into them just like getting into sets faster. So not just like running and lots of fast break, but actually being able to get into sets faster than they have. It's hard to know what they're going to look like because I am so used to watching one thing for the last 11 years. Like for the last 11 years, Damian has brought it up the court. Everybody got set. We saw, and then, there's an ISO ball, or maybe he kicks it out, and that's it. It's been the same thing reliably. It works, but it's been the same thing every year. And so like even the 2 preseason games, it looks nothing like that at all. It looks very chaotic. It looks like them running down to the other end of the court and then like, what are we doing? Which is why I think it is really important that we've got guys like Anfernee Simons and Malcolm Brogdon and guys who've done it before. Cause like, I think that will speed up their figuring it out if they have at least a couple guys with experience on the floor. So anyway, speed, athleticism, all the things. They've got great vibes. Like they said vibes as many times as they said fast. So if nothing else, they're going to have great vibes.
Fast vibes, maybe even. Yeah. And would you expect them, just based off this personnel, because like to be like just as aggressive on defense as they are on offense, to where I think when I frame it as the offense, it's by playing fast, you might not be inefficient, but you'll create opportunities you're not equipped to create in the half court because of your lack of proven self-creation, and you're trying to experiment with Shaedon Sharpe on ball, Scoot's running point for the first time. So just playing fast and chaotic is a way to sort of paper over those learning deficiencies. I think you can do that defensively, and people don't necessarily think about that a lot, where it's, yeah, if you're going to, you might foul a ton by trying to force a bunch of turnovers and taking a bunch of gambles, but it might lead to opportunities at the other end or get you stops that you're not going to get anyway because you don't trust your young group, as you just outlaid. I didn't even, until you framed it that way, the fact that they just have like 6 or more of these guys that have two years or 1 year or fewer experience in the NBA, would you expect them to be like hyper aggressive on defense? Because that's not something they've done for, I know they ended up doing pretty well. I think it was 21-22 in forcing opponent turnovers, but like if you go through Blazers history, like the past decade, they're not forcing a ton of turnovers. And so would you expect them to be kind of, I love the word you used, would you expect them to be just as chaotic on defense, or do you think that they'll try to maybe stay a little bit more conservative?
So I believe that, or I don't believe, I think that you can get more immediate results by focusing on the offense right now and playing some just basic fundamental defense.
Oh, okay.
And I think that with such a young crowd, it's really going to be the coach's choice. Do I want to throw them in and really have them learn the hard way how to play defense from game one? Or do we want to start working on some things that we can really improve at a faster rate and maybe like have these guys feel a little bit more successful a little bit earlier, because defense takes a long time. And like that's kind of what Coach Stotts would do. Like when he'd get a new team, they'd focus on offense first and they get their offense going. Well, and we know Stotts is an offensive coach, but like because then you don't have to worry about that part. Like you get the offense cooking and then you go back and you try to work on defense. Now we saw how successful that was. So maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe the new coach says, hey, you know what? We're going to really focus on defense first. And given his background, and he's supposed to be, you know, this great defensive mind, maybe that's the way that they're going to go. So I really have no idea which direction he's going to go. I'm open to either.
And, you know, now that I think about it, I think the Blazers or Cronin seemed like way too obsessed with DeAndre Ayton. I am intrigued by what he does outside of Phoenix, but knowing what we saw from him defensively 2 years ago, and then now having Robert Williams III, at least having both of them for now, having those guys being able to, in theory, cover up, even if you want to play a little bit more conservative where you're not going to come up as high with them, or maybe don't want RW3 switching. People hate when I call him RW3. They want Time Lord. Or R-Dub, like coming up, like you have having those guys as sort of, I mean, Robert Williams with just his rotations and stuff, maybe having the center position on lock in theory from a defensive, like DeAndre Ayton's still a pretty good defender. I don't think he's this gross defender. Maybe that actually helps everybody because from my perspective, you've already sold me on it, like of not having to go the chaotic route. I'm just like, they're not going to be able to do anything, but I keep forgetting that they have these two proven guys who will be there to cover up stuff. So yeah, you could be aggressive, but DeAndre Ayton at his peak was really good at directing people on defense, like and calling out stuff. And I think Robert Williams III has played in so many different kind of base defenses, the nuances of which fly straight over my head. So I won't get into those, but like having that much experience just from the bigs probably makes things, and even having like Matisse Thybulle on this roster, like you have, and Jerami Grant, I think he's a fine defender. He's probably become, I think people used to view him as like an all defense type guy. I don't know if he's that guy. There's like guys who have played before. And I'm of the belief that, and maybe this is just because I struggle to understand what's happening defensively, that's where the biggest learning curve is. And so to have these, let's say 3 players who are like, they're veterans and like, they're going to play and they're there. I'm just wondering if that streamlines the defensive development more than people think. And in a weird way, because we're going to get into Scoop, Shaedon, the whole thing is like, it might be tougher on offense to figure that out just because these guys aren't going to create. Like Jerami Grant can do some of it on offense. I don't really want to see it from DeAndre Ayton, quite frankly, but they're all actually good and proven, battle-tested defensively for the most part. You saying all that just really made me think of it, and that they could be in a better setup defensively than I was considering.
Yeah, and so I want to talk about both DeAndre Ayton and Williams and Brogdon too. The thing about adding them to the team is something that I've been talking about like all summer before the trade happened. I was so worried, and it kind of goes back to something I was saying earlier. I was so worried about the fact that there was nobody on the team who had gone into deep runs and had proven themselves through, again, deep runs. I mean, Jerami Grant went to the Final Four in college, and then he had, I think, one run to the conference finals, and then everything else was like a first and out. Anfernee Simons didn't play college. Shaedon Sharpe didn't play college. Attended college, didn't play college. Scoot, G League Ignite, not a winning team. These guys that their Blazers are hinging their future on do not have any experience with winning. And so I was really happy with Ayton, Williams, Brogdon as all being these guys who've been there. And that doesn't mean that like this year our players are going to know how to make it all the way to, the conference finals or whatever. But just, I was really wanting to have people who had a hunger for that kind of thing, just because these guys that are supposed to be the future of our franchise just have not had that. Mm-hmm. They just haven't. G League Ignite, not good record. And I'm sure Scoot learned a lot, and I think he learned a lot about being a professional, but they weren't winners. And Shaedon attended Kentucky but didn't play, and Anfernee took a year at IMG Academy. And so anyway, I was happy to have these additions. The other thing I'll say about Ayton, I love the addition of Ayton because there is no risk to this.
Right.
No risk. You know, if it doesn't work out, they got to pay somebody. When you look at their roster, you know, they're going to have somebody on the, he's making a lot of money on the payroll.
He's still young.
And he's young. And I think, you know, it's, you know, we all talk about the change of, change of scenery. It's going to be great for Nurkic. It's going to be great for, you know, it could potentially be great for Nurkic. It could potentially be great for Ayton. Let's give it a try. Why not? You know, no, like I said, no risk.
So let's start with the bigs then. So what have you learned, or what are you most intrigued by in watching DeAndre Ayton on this team?
So the first thing that I did is I went and I looked up how many dunks he had, and he had 110. And then I started reading Phoenix blogs, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's always turning up dunks." And I was like, "Oh my God, 110 dunks, I'll take it." But so we've had a couple of flashes in preseason games of him like just speeding down the lane in a way that Nurkic really didn't do. But what I think is going to be nice about Ayton is that I have a soft spot for guys who had a really high pick and wasn't really their fault, that they were like the high pick. I mean, he was a number 1 draft pick, right? And so in Phoenix, that was always going to be his label. You are the number 1 pick. You should be doing everything for us, and you should be perfect at all times. Like, that's what I would expect out of a number 1 pick. And I think, being somewhere where he's going to have a different role completely, he's maybe the best player on the team right now. And that was not the case when he was in Phoenix. So I think there's a lot of potential for him. It could be good. I want to see him do some really good screening. That was a key thing that Nurkic did really well, is he protected Damian Lillard and Anfernee Simons. He was a great big brother on the field for those guys because he really protected them and got them space. And I haven't seen 2 preseason games. What have I seen so far? But that's definitely something that I'm going to watch for him, is how is he going to protect Scoot? How is he going to help Scoot offensively, get space to operate, and, lots of potential there.
I'm very optimistic about him, even if the Blazers are not a good defensive team, having a bounce back defensive year, because I think when you look at Phoenix last year, they were just ill-equipped to defend both sides of the pick and roll, and it put a lot on Ayton and put him into some really bad situations. And I think some people's other lasting memories of him is getting torn apart by the Jokic Murray pick and roll, and it's well, everybody's going to get torn apart by that. And also just having Thybulle, having Grant, even just Shaedon Sharpe from a physical build perspective. Phoenix didn't have any of those types of guys last year. They had Josh Okogie, but he's not playing a ton of minutes. So that might actually make life a little easy. Even having someone like Jerami Grant and then Matisse Thybulle on the court at the same time, if they ever go with those minutes, I think that does a lot for him. I'm a little bit more curious about him offensively on this team, because I do think he's best suited. He can be a very good screener and create space, as you mentioned, when he wants to be. And I know that he had 110 dunks, but you were going to see him in transition, take a hook shot when it should be a dunk. And we're
used to that.
The stakes are low, so it's fine. But because he doesn't have, I think Brogdon, if they're going to hold on to him for a little bit, would be important here. He still needs to be set up. And his Scoot, is Shaedon. I think Anfernee Simons has improved enough to where they can do that. But because everybody is so young, will there be a reliable table setter for him to go to that pick and roll, to find him in the pockets? And can he be more committed? I think the other problem in Phoenix, you mentioned vibes. The vibes were just off there. I don't know what happened, but they got rid of Monty, they got rid of Chris Paul. Now Ayton is gone. The vibes were just off. And so if the Blazers have better vibes, is he willing to roll harder, get to the rim more on those things? So I'm fascinated to watch it, but I worry that, and you talked about this on your podcast with Caitlin Cooper, the vast majority of the looks for his career have just come off assists. And if you want to explore the post game, the face-up game, I don't know that I've seen enough from him to think that I want to see more of that. And I know the stakes are low enough that the Blazers can do that, and they probably should. That's where I think I'm most, fascinated and concerned about how much value it seems like Cronin in the front office. Because, I don't know if you read the piece, and I'm sure you just know, it was like the Ayton was coming no matter what the Damian Lillard trade was. Like Phoenix didn't know who they were getting aside from Nurkic and maybe Nas Little, but like they knew that Ayton was going to Portland. The Blazers were willing to take Ayton. They wanted Ayton. And so I think I think it's a reasonable bet to make. It's just offensively, I'm a little concerned about whether right now he's in an environment where we can see him improve a great deal.
I think that the thing is that his improvement right now is not who we're worried about.
All right.
I mean, he's what, 25, 26. He needs to be steady, I think, because we've got, and that's that for a guy who, had a knock on him about his consistency, like that's what's being asked. And like, can he be a good support for these other guys who they are really invested in? And I just think if it works out, it's like a great thing. It's like when Nurkic first came to Portland, Nurkic was not the centerpiece of that trade. The draft pick was the centerpiece of that trade. And Nurkic got here and he woke up and was like, we all got Nurk fever. And, it turned out, better than we ever expected. So that's kind of the thing with Ayton. It's just like, if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, then, it's like, this is the time. Give him a try.
They have Robert Williams III as well. And so what are you like, what's most intriguing about him to you? And also, do you think that they're actually like, what is the status of this too big thing where it's like, do they view both of them as like, well, Robert Williams III is cheap. It's like, he doesn't play a ton of minutes. He gets injured all the time anyway. Or do you think that this ends up being sort of a layover from one of these two dudes?
So with regards to Robert Williams, I refuse to really learn or get excited about him until he's on the floor, because so far he hasn't made it the first two games. And I was burned so hard last year by Gary Payton II that I was like, I am not getting attached to Robert until we see the floor. I would assume that all of these guys who came in here with any experience are not necessarily on the roster for the rest of the season. But maybe if they like it here and they fit in really well and happen to have really good chemistry with some of these younger players who are supposed to be the intended future of the franchise, and maybe that will be the case for him. But so far I'm all on board with Moses Brown, and I am totally open to Time Lord being awesome as well. But like I said, until he hits the floor, I am not getting attached or giving my heart to him because I got so burned by Gary Payton last year.
Assuming he does take the floor, and I think this has been a big topic of discussion, do you think the Blazers will try the too big stuff?
I mean, I don't think they need to, but this is the year to try everything, right? But they do have a lot of guys who could potentially be playing power forward minutes. So it's going to be a big balance of like, who do you want to develop? Who do you want out there getting the minutes? And, so, I mean, I kind of think that he'll probably pretty much be the backup center, but I'm sure that they will try, for even limited minutes just to see what it looks like. Again, we have no idea what Chauncey wants to do. We have no idea what his style is. The only thing that we know about him is when Neil Olshey gave him like more guards than anybody should have on the team, he went and played all his guards and was like, you're going to give me guards? Here you go. That's all we know about Chauncey. So, again, big question mark.
The Brogdon stuff, do you expect him to be in Portland longer than most people are thinking? Like, do they view him as, we have a real backup point guard for the most part? And then also you mentioned in terms of setting up younger dudes and then helping them behind the scenes off the floor, do you think that he could end up being in Portland, even if it's just to the trade deadline, where do they, rather than move him now, do they maybe try and build his value back up? Because we know all about the scuttled trade to LA because they were worried about his injury history.
Yeah, I think he might go on the list of what we call certified Blazer cuties, who are guys who were here for a short time but made a really big impact, like Josh Hart, a guy who was not here for a long time but made a huge impact just with his presence and wasn't a Blazer for a long time, but it was a good time. I really don't think that Brogdon is going to be here that long. I think this is a great chance for him to remind everybody that he's a guy who will really improve the chances for a contender. I think it's really important that he's here now for a couple of months. I think that the Blazers are going to really benefit from him being here. But I just feel like there's going to be too many teams who need someone just like him come the trade deadline.
All right, we're finally on to Scoot Henderson, which I'm sure so many people have been waiting for. What most intrigues you about Scoot? What are your general impressions of him so far?
So one of my favorite things about Scoot so far was that at Summer League, we were sitting there watching him play, and there was a whole row of Laker fans behind us who were over the moon about Scoot. And so I was like, ha, he came to Portland. so that was an exciting thing about him. I think that Scoot, he is strong. He is fast. He has great court vision. He has all these things that you want a point guard to have, pass first point guard. I think the team is going to play an exciting kind of ball. And that's probably the thing that I'm most excited about, because as much as I love Damian Lillard, those were not the most exciting games to watch. And, you know, it was fun when he's on a heater. There's nothing like it. But also when he's on a heater, it's the same every trip down the court. And I was thinking about this, Dan, about the difference between watching the teams in the past to watching this year's team. And I thought about it. So I used to watch a lot of Hallmark, and then I switched to Bravo.
Ooh.
And like this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's happening with my basketball viewing. Hallmark, you know what's going to happen. It's going to be reliable. It's fine. It's going to go through the same formulaic thing every time. And then, it's going to be over. Then you go to Bravo, where it's just utter chaos, and there's table flipping, and there's crying, and there's people hugging, and there's people fighting. And it's just like utter chaos. And also really juicy and fun to watch. So you might end up at the end of the episode going, oh my God, what did I just watch? That was so fun. And so that's kind of what I feel like I've gone from. I've gone from watching Hallmark to watching Bravo when it comes to watching a team led by Damian Lillard to watching a team that's going to be led by Scoot Henderson, who just has a whole different approach to the game as far as I can tell.
He should be, because they were 22nd in average possession time on offense last year. That we know that's going to like shoot way up, but like he is someone who I think that they can get to like just push after another team makes a shot, where it's like even off of misses, like this team wasn't particularly fast, but it's easier to play faster off misses and turnovers. But this feels like someone who maybe not right away, but at least by the end of the season, like even out of the inbounds, like he can just create havoc, like just getting up the floor, getting you into your set, or catching defenses before they're set. So I'm really fascinated to see how committed they are to really playing in that manner, because I think that's the best way for them offensively to catch teams off guards is to push at everything with Scoot, like not just in transition, but like even sort of to up your half court speed.
Yeah. And that's, in order for that to happen, they have to get the rebounds, which hasn't been their forte, and the other team has to miss. So, I think that will be fun. But I really think towards the beginning of the season anyway, I think Anfernee is going to hold the ball a lot. Okay. And so I don't think a lot of the offense is going to be initiated by Scoot, but just his ability that like when he does get the ball, that he has a really quick decision making mechanism. Mm-hmm. and so I think it's going to send people like going one way or going the other way, because, they just don't know which option that he's going to take, and he's going to be able to make that decision really quickly. So I'm not sure how much of the chaos is going to be from him initiating the offense, but I think from him and his capabilities being a part of the offense, at least at the beginning, is going to it's going to show some interesting things. He gets like a half an inch and he's like snaking through in ways that Damian couldn't do for many years. Damian eventually got there, but Scoot's, starting off with this ability to like get in there and finish at the rim in a fun way.
Do you have any concerns or questions about like just his game or what you know about him leading in? I think for a lot of people, it's the jumper, like both the pull-up jumper in between, or like, is he going to be able, if you're going to have him play off the ball a bunch, can he knock down some of those threes off the catch? I'm
totally willing to be patient on that. The biggest thing that I'm concerned about is what I've already talked about, is just the winning. Like, I know they say that they want to win, but he hasn't played on a team that put an emphasis on winning. The team was on player development, when he was on Ignite, and that's going to be another thing. So I want to see the fire in him and we saw glimpses of it at Summer League, just the way that he was like such a team player and such a great cheerleader off the bench or whatever. But I want him to take every game personally. And even if they don't win, I want to see like a guy who's really, really hungry to win, just because, not that I'm saying that he's not, but he just wasn't playing on a team that was like that before.
What were your general impressions of the rookie Shaedon Sharpe experience?
Shaedon brought a lot of joy last year in a year that was pretty joyless. But I don't think, and like Shaedon's dunks were just a thing of beauty, not because it was like they were necessarily like so strong, but just because like his form was perfect. Like if you get stills of Shaedon dunks, his toes are pointed, his legs are parallel, his arms are like perfectly positioned.
They're aggressively aesthetic.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I love that. I love that. Yeah. They were just beautiful, but I don't think that's really the Shaedon Sharpe that we're going to see, a guy who can like dunk beautifully. That's not really useful to the team. A guy who can shoot, a guy who can create his own offense, a guy who can be like, oh, I can't shoot this, but I see who can, So I think we need to see a lot more of that. And I think we did at the end, once they shut everything down and just handed in the ball. I think we did see more of what the Shaedon Sharpe game is going to be, which is less dunky and more just like reliable scoring. And I've heard you say about whether or not he has ever Googled the word assist.
Did I say that? I think I wrote it. Did I say that? I probably did.
But when he was handed the ball for those last 10 games, he went from like 1 and 1.5 to like 4. So like when he had the ball more, he was able to find people more. And so I think the game that I love so much of Shaedon, which is those beautiful, beautiful dunk highlights, I don't think that's going to be the game that we're going to see so much this year, because I think that he knows that his real value is not in like, trying to make it to the dunk contest, but it's being a reliable scorer who can make smart decisions when he's got the ball in his hands.
Do you think he's capable of making those passes outside of like if you're just in the half? Because he did, at least from the games I watched before the shift, like he got tunnel vision on like some of his drives. Like the pass percentage was not high, the assist percentage was obviously even lower. Like, do you trust that he has that consistent level in him, or does he need to be, we'll just keep throwing this word out there, embroiled in the chaos, and that's how he's going to get his assists? Or do you trust that he could maybe be someone who kind of breaks things down from that standstill?
I don't want to say I don't trust anybody right now, but he's 20. He's in his second year. He's not there yet. And I think that's the biggest challenge that I am having with this year. And I think a lot of other fans in the fan base are having, is we've got to reset our expectations. And we've got to be like, well, just because, Shaedon's got a year under his belt, he's going to have everything down. He's not going to have everything down. And we also have questions about the coach. So no, I don't trust it. That doesn't mean that I don't think that he could get there. But right now, today, like before the season starts, no, I don't trust it. He needs a lot more practice. And he's going to get it, which is great.
It does sound like you think that they are going to give him sort of that runway to try these things out, though. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of minutes for Shaedon and Scoot. I don't think there's going to be as many for Shaedon, because I don't think they need to rush him. I think Scoot, they kind of need to rush because they kind of need to. I mean, they have Anfernee, who can play point guard. But I
better at passing, like incrementally year by year. It feels like he's just better.
Yeah, but Scoot's the guy that like you want to have as, because that's his natural position. That's what he wants to be doing. So I don't think that they're in as big of a hurry with Shaedon. So I think they'll prioritize making sure Scoot has a minute. So I don't think that they're gonna hand Scoot the ball and just be like, go for it. I think they're gonna put Scoot in, I don't think they're going to hand Shaedon the ball and say, go for it. I think they're going to put Shaedon in and say, be a part of this offense. and do the things that we've done, run the things that we've run in practice. And let's see how you do when we do those things.
Did this pivot into a rebuild clarify or complicate Anfernee Simons' place with this team long term?
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it from that point of view, but I have been wondering like how he feels about it. We were all very, very concerned about how Damian felt about it. And, you know, Anfernee, although he's young, has been there for like, I don't know, his 5th or 6th year. So
he's their longest tenured player now, right?
Yeah.
No? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he is. He's the long person who's been on the roster longest. So I think potentially it could really be exciting for him, because if he's patient to wait around for these other guys to develop, I think they could have something exciting. But I just don't know if this is the best place for him with these young guys. I keep looking at him going, I hope he's happy. I wonder if he's happy. I wonder if he's happy with how things went.
He's a tough player to read, but also I know you mentioned like the other young guys, but he's only 24. Like it's not, and we also saw like the past couple seasons, like when after Dame gets shut down, like Anfernee Simons is still really good. Like this is not just he's dependent on being the secondary option. Like, no, he's not a caps lock point guard, but like, especially last season, like he really impressed during a lot of the stretches that he's playing as, let's call it the lead guard for lack of like a better term. And so, you know, eventually they're going to move Brogdon. You already mentioned, like you said that. So there will be reps there for him to be like a pretty prominent part of their development. I think it would be more of an organizational decision where they decide, and this was a question I had for you, like, do they not think that they can get away with playing Sharpe, Simons, and Scoot together? Is that too like guardy for them? Like too familiar?
Well, between them, they probably have about 4 or 5 inches on the previous 3-guard lineup.
Ayton is he 6'5" or 6'6"? I don't know. What is Ayton? I'm gonna look that up. I think he's 6'5".
Yeah, I don't remember, but collectively they are taller. They're getting there.
6'6". I shortened him. 6'6".
Yeah. Yeah. So collectively they're getting there. Again, it's so much like, what does this coach want to do with these guys? And, you know, is Anfernee going to get the playing time that he wants? I think that'll be a big deal, because also we've got Malcolm Brogdon who's going to want to play because he wants to show what he can do. And then we've got these 2 young guards who we need to get out there and get as many reps as we possibly can. So again, it's just, there's so many questions about what does the coach want to do that we just kind of have to wait and find out.
I think they probably, at least I would imagine, they play a bunch of time together. The key is to whether it could work long term. And I'm curious if you agree with me. Can Shaedon Sharpe defend wings? And we didn't see him. We saw some of it last year, but like he was kind of moving around and wasn't on these like primary assignments a lot of the time. He's long. His wingspan's like, it is over 7 feet, or it is 7 feet. So he's long enough to do it. 6'6" is just sort of like that borderline size where is he a wing defender? Is he not? I guess with the length and just the physical explosiveness, you could make the bet that he is, but he actually might be, because Simons works on the ball, off the ball. He is so scalable on the offensive end. It really just might come down to, do you think that you can play league average defense or get enough wing defense out of having that trio as a big part of your team?
And we've talked about this whole group without even mentioning Matisse Thybulle. So it's like there's a whole other guy.
What did you think of him last year?
I mean, again, I think he's got a skill set that is important to the team. Somebody who is proven to play defense. And since he's been here, I've seen other players on the team attempt more behind the back, you know, when you poke it out from behind, like Matisse always does. I've seen our players do that now too. So obviously he's rubbing off on the rest of the team, which is exciting. So I think that he's been a good addition to the team, and he seems happy here. And he's, again, right in that age range, which is nice. So these guys, I think it's just going to be a matter of, what does the coach want? Which groupings gel the best and have sort of the best communication? And then who can emerge as the vocal leader on the team? That's a big question. I don't think it's necessarily Matisse, but that's where we started this question.
Well, I mean, it is a tough question because some of these guys are so temporary. Will they feel inclined to be the vocal leader on this team? And to that end, What are the odds that Jerami Grant is still on the roster past the trade deadline?
I don't know. He's another one that's hard to read, like Matisse. These guys are just like so chill, and they go out there and they do their job and they answer the questions and they seem content. They also seem like they have skill sets that other teams might really find valuable. And how much longer is our team going to try to store up assets if they're going to keep trying to fill the cupboard with players or with picks? Which one is it going to be, and which one is best for our future? So I would probably guess that he's not going to be on the roster after the trade deadline, but we'll see.
I agree with you. And I think the contract isn't as scary as people painted it to be, but I do think it's fair to be concerned about how it ages. It probably makes smart to move him once he's eligible sooner rather than later, when teams still view him as a need and are willing to eat like the risk on the back end of that. And you just have to assume, unless he's kind of thrown off kilter by the new just dynamics here, that now the sooner rather than later makes the most sense to move him, because he's never in theory going to be better than he is over the next year or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for that reason. And I mean, although with contracts, I never worry about contracts anymore. Like they can make anything work, right?
We saw Russell Westbrook get traded on his, and John Wall get traded on his a bunch of times. Yeah, I get it.
They can make anything work. But I think it's that somebody will need his skill set, and that he is somebody who could probably easily adapt to whatever situation. He wouldn't be a hard person to work into any. And if suddenly, Celtics are that close, or somebody else in the East wants to enter this, race, maybe Miami.
Could use them.
Give us a call, Miami.
And yeah, so you're right. The contract doesn't actually matter. I guess if you just want to make sure, if you're the Blazers and we're turning Jerami Grant into a first round pick, I would say sooner rather than later makes more sense, from looking at it. And but teams have shocked us before where they've just held on to guys you think they're being moved that year. And then, look at, everyone thought Lauri Markkanen was going to be this transient presence in Utah. Now he's this centerpiece of the franchise. I don't think that happens here, but he could be here. You never know. Could we go through some of the other players on this roster, and you could just give me your thoughts or fun facts or whatever about them, maybe what type of role you expect them to play? Do I need to begin with Moses Brown? I didn't expect you to be so high on Moses Brown.
Well, so Moses was drafted by Portland, or he was signed originally by Portland. I think he went undrafted, but he played in Portland for his first year, and he was this tiny little twig, and he just looked like a gazelle out there with his just very long, lanky stride, just kind of fast forward. He is big dude. He's put on a lot of weight. He knows how to throw it around. He is a fantastic talker. The first game, granted it was against a New Zealand Breakers team, which is not an NBA team, but I was in a good position to watch him the whole game, and he talked steadily while he was in there. And this team really needs somebody who can talk, and for whom that's not a new skill that they're learning. So I really liked it. And he's going to be the third center, but given, maybe the injury history, or given whether or not Ayton works out, I think we're going to see a little more of Moses Brown. So I'm excited about him, and it's always great to have a little homecoming, and just especially to see somebody who has he's really improved his game a lot since the last time we saw him. He's worked really hard to get there.
He is a good rebounder too. And so if you're concerned about getting rebounds, he is someone who will definitely, because if you're playing Jerami Grant a ton, he's just never been a good rebounder. You need your big to be a good rebounder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Every year the Blazers rebounding over the last 3 years has gotten progressively worse compared to the rest of the league. So we really are hoping to find somebody who can really kind of organize the team in that way. I was saying the other day that I kind of wish a guy like Ed Davis would come in, and because Ed Davis used to be able to kind of just organize the rebounding squad. Like they just always, sometimes they would all crash into each other because they were all going for the same ball, and he'd get them kind of organized. What I've seen of the 2 games I've seen so far, it was just more like everybody was like, I thought you were going to get it. I thought you were going to get it. And then it just kind of lands in Jerami Grant's hands. So they have a lot of opportunity here. And maybe Moses Brown could, be that guy who, with his vocalness that he's shown so far, can kind of organize them on that end.
How about any impressions or thoughts on Toumani Camara yet? And if you don't, I have a ton. Don't worry.
No, I would love to hear yours, because except for that people are like, ooh, this is like kind of a sneaky good addition to the team. Yeah. Tell me about what you're excited about with him.
So one, I won't take credit for knowing about him, but I was talking to the Timeline Pod guys for the Suns podcast, and they were over the moon about Camara. This is before the Nurkic trade. And so I watched some of him. I'm smitten. This is just, he's not super long for like a 6'7". I think he has a net neutral wingspan, but like he just fills so many gaps. And there's like, he can actually help with offensive rebounding. Like you're worried about rebounds, and this team is probably going to miss a lot of shots. He will get in there for offensive. Like he will get in there. He is super switchable on the defensive end. And so if Chauncey wants to switch a bunch with this group or play some lineups that can switch, because you have 2 bigs in Ayton and R-Dub who can switch reasonably well, I think he ends up being great for that. He is not a ball stopper on offense, and I'm very curious. I don't understand. Not that I don't understand. I'd like to know what he turns into as a scorer. Really, it feels like he might be someone who needs to be kind of cutting, being on the move, more of a play finisher. But like he showed, and I'm always very hesitant to ascribe any value to what we see in Summer League. He's not going to get the reps in Portland that he got in Summer League. But there is some on-ball stuff to what he could do. I don't know if he's like, maybe he'll get all the way to the basket. I think he's just so plug and play, defensively versatile. He will I think he'll replace some of like the Nas hustle, like when you saw moments of that. And I'm hoping that they give him minutes, because I think he could be a really good NBA, at least a rotation NBA player.
Yeah. I mean, all of that from your mouth to God's ears. Give him minutes. I mean, that's just what it is. It's just like, who's going to get a chance to get on the floor, who stays healthy. We just are really going to hope that everybody stays healthy. But if everybody stays healthy, some people aren't going to get it. But one exciting thing about Portland this year is this is the first time we've had a G League team. Oh, so yes. A lot of these guys who so he might, if he's not getting a chance to play for the Blazers, he may get moved, to play some G League time, which is we're really excited about that.
I will say, I don't watch G League, but this player, if he's going to spend time in the G League, I will watch, or at least his film. Rayan Rupert. Do you have any sort of impressions of him so far?
I mean, again, Rayan Rupert has reportedly grown an inch since he got here.
And I mispronounced his name, so thank you for correcting me.
Well, I don't know. I think that's how it is. I was always like, how come like all the guys that I went to high school with went away to college and then grew like 6 inches, but none of the NBA players who come to my team ever grow. But apparently he has grown. Apparently Shaedon, I think, has grown as well. Young raw talent. Let's just see how the coach decides he wants to use him.
I probably would be shocked if he did. I expect him to spend a lot of time not with this team, but his standing reach is absurd. You mentioned raw. He is super raw on offense, but for a team that wants to play in transition, and I think he seems, if you give him enough space, I kind of trust him to like get downhill with the ball in his hands going against defenses. It's going to be, and this is a cliche, the shot. But the physical tools on defense, he could be a not smart defender and still be a good defender. That is just how physically ready he seems. And I hope he turns into a reliable offensive player, because I think he can be, let's throw the word chaos out of there. Like he could be an agent of chaos.
Chaos agent.
On the defensive end from day one. Maybe not, he's a good defender, but you want to create chaos. Rupert can do that.
Chaos is definitely the theme. And what I'm hoping for the team in general this year is that they can have like productive chaos. that they may catch other teams by surprise, because I don't think anyone's going to be spending a lot of time going too deep in the scouting reports for the Trailblazers, but we're hoping that they can catch them by surprise and sneak in there and take advantage of maybe people who weren't prepared for what they've got, or that they surprisingly will put some stuff together that they like had been working on, laboring through in practice, not quite being able to do it, and then suddenly it'll like all, you know, come into place, and it can create chaos, and the other team's like, what just happened? That's what we're counting on is that kind of productive chaos this season.
And finally, at least of the players I have listed, Jabari Walker seems like he might be in line for a bigger role just by virtue of, okay, they need a backup for him. Maybe they view it as, oh, we didn't get to Kris Murray yet either. But Jabari Walker, what type of role do you expect him to play?
Jabari, from the moment he stepped on the court at Summer League, showed that he's really smart, really good decision maker, and he has grown a lot. Like physically, he has more weight that he
people
really
were bouncing off of him at Summer League. He's strong.
Yeah, and he's gotten even stronger this year. So I think that he's ready to take that leap and to get real minutes. Like last year, it was still like, oh, we're going to see Jabari. Yay, we got Jabari minutes. And so I think that he could be like, I think that he will be a part of the rotation. He's also a good rebounder. And he's also a good, you know, he's not a playmaker, but he's got great vision. So I don't necessarily know that he's going to be out there like creating a lot of plays, but I think he can see like where the ball needs to be so that it can turn into offense.
And it's still 3-point shooting is kind of the swing skill for him, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's still developing there.
What about Kris Murray? Do you expect him to kind of be in the rotation right away?
I think everybody's going to be in the rotation right away. I think coach is going to try everybody out. I could see him, you know, playing. I could see him also getting a lot of time in the G League. It's just like the G League not only is, you know, it's close. It's like, you know, 10 miles away from the the G League arena is like 10 miles away from the.
Well, that's a big deal if you want to shuttle the players to and from. I know Indy, someone just pointed out in our Discord, like they're moving their G League team to be closer to the professional team, which is, so the fact that it's close is good. I didn't realize it was that close.
Yeah, so I think that that he will probably get a lot of time down there.
I'm very curious to see. I wonder if his draft stock would have been as high if Keegan Murray didn't just have the season he did, because I do think a lot of people compared him to Keegan Murray, which, okay, fine. I don't see it like with what Keegan, like if he can do some of the motion shooting stuff, which I think when you look at this roster, you have Anfernee Simons, there's not like a ton of motion shooters, like someone who can run around, fly off the ball right now. If he can do that, I just don't know if he can, like Keegan Murray did it as a wing. I don't know if I view Kris Murray is what I'm saying. I'm not big on positions, but he feels like a pure 4 to me. Like, did you get that vibe seeing anything from him at all? Or like, you're just too early to tell?
Well, for a large part, I think it's too early to tell. I think also that you're right that Keegan's success probably helped Kris. But I also think that because they've played together, that they're not mirror images of each other. Like they play differently because they've had to play together for so long that they don't play the same way. And, you know, I guess Kris did a lot of the setting up of Keegan. And when he decided to, you know, stay at Iowa for, you know, for an extra year, you know, he didn't play the exact same role that Keegan did. So I think, you know, he definitely, or not definitely, but I think Keegan's great performance last year probably helped him. But I also think that they're like totally different players.
You always give a different perspective. That makes me think, where it's like, well, they played together for so long, then Kris isn't going to have the time to explore these skills if that's how Keegan Murray needed to be used. Never even would have thought of that. That's why we bring you on here, Terry. You actually make me think coherently. Are you ready for the cookie cutter portion of the podcast?
Sure thing.
So the first question I have, is there any underrated strengths or concerns about this team that we didn't discuss that you also think aren't getting enough attention?
Well, I brought it up, but the G League thing I think really is actually a big deal. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how that goes. And that's something that I don't think people outside of the Blazer fan base really understand. And I think it's something that they're going to try this year. And I think it'll be a good thing, especially given how young this team now is.
I think I mean, I even told you, I didn't realize how close it was. So clearly I didn't give it a second thought. And that's good to have. If guys like Camara or Murray or Rupert are not going to be in the rotation, having that outlet to where it's more easy for them to get run outside of the professional club, I think is and they still get to then practice with the actual club because it's so close. Like that's actually a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've kind of already mentioned this, you've already mentioned that the rotation you expect to be all over the place. Can we start here though? What would you expect to be? And I didn't see anything definitive. I did try to look, but what would you expect to be sort of the opening night starting five?
So I think on the opening night, we're going to see Scoot and Anfernee. And I think that Matisse is going to play the three. And then, of course, Jerami and Deandre Ayton. I think a lot of people are wondering if it's going to be Shaedon, but I really think it's going to be Matisse. And I think that's to give Scoot as strong of a start as possible so that he's surrounded by the best players. And then Shaedon will be like coming in off the bench.
And so if that's the starting five, who would you expect to be the most used five players after that? Shaedon's a lock. We can agree on that. R-Dub's a lock. Yeah.
Sorry. Shaedon, Brogdon, Williams, Jabari. How many is that? 4?
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. There's
Kris. Would it be Kris Murray just because he was drafted in the first round?
Yeah. God, who do I have left?
Moses Brown, your guy Moses.
I wouldn't be surprised if Moses gets more time than Kris, and it kind of depends on, again, which way the coach goes. Does he want somebody? Because I would think that with his lineups, he's going to want to have a balance of guys with a certain amount. Like he doesn't want to throw just rookies and just, first and second year guys in together. He's going to be wanting to have guys with some experience. So I wouldn't be surprised if Brown saw a little bit more time than Murray, at least at the beginning.
Based on everything you know about this roster as constructed, your concerns, your thoughts on them, do you expect this group to be better on the offensive end or the defensive end?
Offense. I think we're going to start with offense and then we'll build defense in.
Is there my favorite question to ask, is there a weirdo, wacky, they won't try it, but they should lineup that you think they should roll out?
I mean, I think for teams that know who their players are, yeah, but it's all weird, wacky lineups.
That's also fair.
I don't think there's a specific one because we haven't seen them. There's 4 guys on the team that were there last year. So
I think I would like to see them kind of lean into like what's the most versatile, maybe, but weirdo defensive lineup we could throw out there. And I know the offense could probably look terrible during these minutes, but I want to see the R-Dub and Ayton then maybe throw like Sharpe and Thybulle and probably Simons or Scoot in there as like creation. But I also would be like, if we're just trying to really go for chaos, like let's throw Camara in there and it'll just be 2 bigs, some wing defense, some good wing defenders. I don't know who's creating for you in that. Maybe that's how you get Sharpe reps is like, oh, it's kind of, we're giving Scoot a rest, Simons a rest. They're on the bench at the same time, which probably is not a good idea, quite frankly, offensively. But let's see what Shaedon Sharpe can do, kind of leading those groups of 4 guys.
Well, and you give me an idea. It has been so long since the Blazers had more than like one guy over 7 feet. I want to see the 5 tallest players. So just see what that's like.
Ayton, Williams, Moses Brown, Jerami Grant, and then Jabari Walker. Would that be the 5 biggest players? I think.
Well, we could call up Ibubaji from the G League. He could play. He's tall.
Hey, the G League's local enough that you could do that. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So I sorted by height. So we've got Moses Brown at 7'2", Ibubaji at 7'1", Deandre Ayton at 7, John Butler. He's another 2-way player. He's 7 feet tall, and he really is a 3. Wap Reith, he's another fun guy. Let's see if we really wanted somebody who could handle the ball. Yeah, let's throw in Toumani Camara.
Or
throw him in there as the ball handler.
Just because he does have, I think it's like a 9-foot standing reach. That's definitely not true. But Rayan Rupert, I know he's only 6'6", but he's got the standing reach. So can we include? I just want to see him. Any lineup with him, I'll count as weirdo, and I want to see it.
All right, we'll put him. So we'll put in Rayan Rupert, and then we'll have Moses and DeAndre and Jerami. And then did I say Robert Williams? We'll put him.
No, you didn't. So yeah, 3 centers at once. It's kind of the response to, they don't have a ton of centers, but they did play 4 guards at one point.
Yeah.
Why not just try 3?
Why not 3 centers? Yeah. I'll tweet you that alert when that lineup goes in.
Yes, please. So as we record this, their current win total is at 27.5. We're recording this on the 14th. It'll go live on the 15th of October. Would you take the over or the under on that? Trying to factor in any sort of, let's call it chaos that could happen with them maybe making other moves.
Well, of course, my heart says over, but my brain says under. It's going to be a long season. There's going to be some rough nights, and there's going to be a steep learning curve. So I'm going to take the under.
Would you expect them? I'm with you, just because I think this is one of the organizations that will be experimental enough to where maybe they're bad, but they're fun bad, and they're valuable bad because they're getting information about their future. And I think that's very important. The other thing I will say is, we didn't see this from Utah right away because they were better out the gate. I don't think Portland will fall into this trap. They will trade their way out of being competent. If Malcolm Brogdon's doing too well, he's going to get traded earlier than people expected. I think that's the ethos that Joe Cronin is going to end up tilting toward. That's just a gut feeling, not any knowledge on it, but that would be my guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good guess. But have you factored in the in-season tournament? What if the Blazers come out the gate like last year's Jazz and they're in contention for the tournament? Maybe they hang on long enough to win that tournament and it becomes the Cronin Cup in honor of Joe Cronin, and then they make their changes.
Honestly, so I would not predict them to win that tournament if other teams care. But when you say that, I just said they're not the Jazz, but when you look at the level of competent NBA players on their roster, Jerami Grant, Robert Williams, DeAndre Ayton, if Matisse Thybulle is shooting 39% from 3 again on like 4 attempts per game, we know Simons is a really good NBA player, and Scoot could be the rookie. I know Wemby's out there, but Scoot could be no worse than like the 2nd or 3rd best rookie. Like, he could be good out the gate. It happens. Maybe this team does. I'm glad I did over-unders already, because if we had done this podcast after I talked to you, I might have been like in existential crisis.
Are you sure you're not a Blazer fan at heart, Dan? You are just doing the typical Blazer fan thing right now. Like, wait a minute.
Well, they have 5. Well, I didn't even mention Brogdon. So they just have 5 like guys that are good NBA players, plus Scoot, who's going to be one day a fantastic NBA player. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that he's a good NBA player out of the gate. And so now I'm like, do they stretch like 6 really? And what if Shaedon Sharpe's in year 2? He could just get there.
I think you're talking yourself into it. In past years, Dan, I think that is actually how it would have gone. In past years, when we had a different GM who was always putting the best team around Damian Lillard that he'd ever put Damian Lillard out, and we were running out Anthony Tolliver and Skal Labissiere, both of whom I love and are lovely players. Like, the Blazers could run out their 5 best players, their 7 or 8 best players, and do fine. But this is the thing that we're trying to get out of. We're trying to get out of doing the best that we can and doing the best development that we can. So I 100% hear you, and I'm trying to be a responsible fan of a building team rather than a like, yeah, I mean, yeah, you could put all those guys in and they could be absolutely fine. But then all these people that the team tanked to get are sitting on the bench. And that's not really what they want, I don't think.
Yeah, I think if you gave them truth serum, because no one will say this on the record, that Joe Cronin probably has his fingers crossed that they're fun and have the worst record in the Western Conference. And I think the only team right now that I'd be prepared to say could be worse than them is the Spurs. I don't know if you've given that any thought. Like,
have
I know they have
Wemby. Jeez,
could be. I think the Blazers and the Spurs are the only 2 teams in the Western Conference who aren't trying to win this year. Even the Rockets are not going to win. They think they're going to, though. So, like, that's a different mindset. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want them to at least be trying to win. And, I mean, I want the players out there.
They will.
Trying.
Yeah.
I want them to, I mean, the players are always trying to win. I want the organization to be fine. I do not want to have another year or half a season of like being mad because they won. That is not fun. That is not where I want to be. I want to embrace every game and be happy at the end of every game that they tried and they were in it. And, you know, it's okay if they win and it's okay if they lose.
This might be a little bit of a role reversal here because we've already had it because I'm talking myself into the Blazers winning like 70 games apparently. But the more I think about it, they could pick up too many wins earlier on in the season. And if they end up not making, like the Jazz didn't start trading people until February, basically. If they go that route, you might be in for some rough games where you're not seeing Sharpe and Scoot and like the players who are important to the future, but might be too good at the moment, which is more out of respect, I think, I fell into this trap with the Jazz, which is maybe why I'm over accounting, but there's like real NBA talent on this roster. As bad as and as developing, I'll say, as they are, it's a lot of real NBA talent. And so they could pick up, I think, more wins early on than people might be expecting.
Well, and wouldn't that be an easier pill to swallow if they're passing around the Cronin Cup every night from house to house?
I'm rooting for that to happen now just because that no one's like people would be like, oh, Spurs have Wemby. Like, yeah, maybe they would win. No one's saying that about the Blazers. I think the only team that's less likely to be the in-season cup pick among people will be the Wizards, who are probably going to be the worst team in the NBA. I've kept you for way too long. Is there anything else I haven't asked you about or anything that you think needs to be discussed before I let you go?
I don't think so. And I know like at the end of a job interview, you're always supposed to have a question for the people who ask you all these questions. And I never have a question. And I never have a question for you because you're so thorough in all of your researching every team. So I appreciate that so much. I appreciate how I've turned you into a little bit of a Blazer fan here. And now
I don't know what just happened during the tail end of this podcast. I have no idea.
I love it. Maybe I can talk to you into coming into the city and watching the Blazers play when they come.
Well, it's easy for me to get into the city. So if you and your husband have free time, let's try and sync up. Are you able to very quickly just tell our listeners where they can find you on social media and where they can find your podcast?
For sure. I am still hanging out on Twitter at TCBBIGGS, and I'm also on Instagram at that same handle. And my podcast is called We Have a Take, and it is under at We Have a Take. And we're a weekly fan podcast about the Trailblazers. We try to look at it from a fan perspective. And this year is really like every year we do deep dives on all of the players, and that takes up most of our time for the last couple of seasons. So we're going to be learning more about all these new players, and we fall in love with every one of them and think, oh my God, this is the most fun team we've ever had. And I fully expect that we're going to do that again this year. So thanks for having me on, Dan. It's been really great. It's always great to talk to you.
Oh, of course. Thank you for giving me so much of your time, as always. I will include everyone who's listening the links to Tara's Twitter and the podcast, again, in the pod and YouTube descriptions. You also do, I think it's a great segment that really gets the podcast on the right foot. The icebreaker stuff is fantastic. So go check them out. And when you guys have interviews, you and Rose, I want to say, I'm so bad with names. Mm-hmm. You do a really great job with that. So go check them out. Again, links, podcast and YouTube. Tara, thank you so much for coming back for year 5 or year 4 or whatever this number it is. And rest assured, I will be spamming your DMs again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.